I remember the sound of laughter before I remember the words. It wasn't loud laughter, not a room, shaking kind. It was sharp and quick, like something tossed and forgotten. My brother's voice cut through it, confident, practiced. "You're just an ugly, disabled idiot." He laughed again, expecting the room to join him. Some people did. Not everyone, but enough. Enough to make it feel approved. My father didn't look at me when he spoke. He looked at the table, at the glasses, at anything but my face. His voice was louder than my brother's had been, carrying the weight of finality he reserved for decisions he didn't want questioned. "I don't want you to carry my last name anymore." No one asked what he meant. No one asked how. It wasn't said like a threat. It was said like a correction. I didn't say anything. I stood up, took my coat, and walked out. There was no dramatic pause, no shaking hands. Just the quiet awareness that if I stayed, something in me would fold in a way it might not unfold again. For a long time after that, I thought leaving was the bravest thing I would ever do. Later, I understood it wasn't bravery. It was survival by subtraction. The years that followed were not remarkable. That's the part people don't expect. There was no montage of suffering or sudden success. I found work that didn't ask much of me emotionally. I rented small apartments. I learned how to navigate spaces that weren't built for my body without making a spectacle of it. I stopped introducing myself with explanations. When people asked about my family, I learned to answer in ways that ended conversations politely. "We're not close. They live far away." Both true enough. The disability didn't go away, but it changed shape in my mind. It stopped being the first thing I measured myself against. I focused instead on what I could control: consistency, preparation, being quietly good at what I did. I became someone people relied on without really knowing why. Still, the past lingered in small, inconvenient ways. Forms that asked for emergency contacts. Doctors who assumed parents were involved. Colleagues who joked about siblings and shared childhood photos over lunch. Every time I heard my last name spoken aloud, there was a brief, involuntary tightening in my chest, like a door closing somewhere inside. I never reached out to my family. Not out of pride, but because I didn't know what version of myself would show up if I did. I wasn't interested in finding out. 12 years passed like that. By then, I was working in a regulatory role, nothing flashy, but precise. My job sat at the intersection of policy and consequence. People didn't come to me for favors, they came because they had to. I liked the clarity of it. Rules, when written well, don't care about your family history. One afternoon, a file crossed my desk that made my stomach drop. A familiar last name, spelled exactly the way I remembered to write it in school. I stared at it longer than necessary, waiting for the jolt of anger or fear I'd imagined would come. It didn't. What I felt instead was distance. Not emotional numbness, but the calm awareness that this name no longer had the authority it once did over me. The case itself was straightforward. An application tied to funding and compliance. There were missing documents, inconsistencies. Nothing dramatic, but enough to require review. Enough that my sign-off mattered. A meeting was scheduled. I didn't ask to be removed from it. There was no conflict of interest by policy standards. We were legally strangers now, after all. That irony wasn't lost on me. When they walked into the room, I recognized them immediately. My brother looked older in a way that surprised me, less assured, more careful. My father had the same posture, the same habit of not quite meeting people's eyes. They didn't recognize me at first. Why would they? I wasn't who they remembered. I wasn't framed by their house, their expectations, their laughter. The authority figure in the room, a senior administrator, led the discussion. She was efficient, neutral, exactly the kind of person you want when outcomes matter. At one point, she turned to me. "We need confirmation before this can proceed," she said. "Your assessment will determine next steps." The room went quiet. My brother's eyes narrowed slightly as he looked at my nameplate, then back at my face. Recognition flickered, then stalled. My father went still. This was the moment people imagine when they talk about revenge. The dramatic reveal. The clever line. The satisfaction. What actually happened was simpler. I spoke calmly. I referenced the file. I explained the deficiencies and the standards required to address them. I used the same tone I would have used for anyone else. Because that was the truth, I was no longer capable of making this personal without effort. The administrator nodded. So at this stage, approval isn't possible. That's correct, I said. Once the requirements are met, they're welcome to reapply. There was no outburst. No apology. My brother didn't laugh. My father didn't speak at all. The decision wasn't punitive. It wasn't generous either. It was final in the way procedures are final, impersonal, documented, undeniable. When the meeting ended, they left without addressing me. I watched them go with a strange, unexpected sense of closure. Not reconciliation. Closure. Later, alone at my desk, I waited for something to hit me. Anger. Grief. Triumph. None of it came. What I felt instead was relief. The quiet kind. The kind that settles in your shoulders when you realize you're no longer bracing for impact. I didn't get my family back that day. I didn't want to. What I regained was smaller and larger at the same times, the certainty that my worth no longer required their recognition. I left the building that evening the same way I'd left the house 12 years earlier, without announcement, without looking back. The difference was this time, nothing followed me out the door.